Seeing this as the perfect opportunity, Lu Sheng decided to stick around and toy with them. Soon, his avatar appeared in front of them, floating ominously in the air, making the two wonder if they'd stumbled upon a mythological figure from legend. Picking up where we left off, they quickly shook off their initial shock. Sure, the sight was surreal, but they didn't have the luxury to freak out. One of them turned to the other, saying there was no need to be spooked since those things don't exist. They knew this guy was strong, but if they attacked together, they might at least manage to escape, even if they couldn't win. The woman nodded, regaining her composure. They were, after all, 2 of the top 10 demons. How could they lose to someone who wasn't even at the level of a martial saint? Pooling their strength, they charged at Lu Sheng. In response, he simply watched them calmly, as if they were nothing but trash. He was mildly amused to see they even had some combo attacks up their sleeve. The woman took a deep breath and launched a massive fireball, while her werewolf partner lunged forward, dashing toward Lu Sheng. Seeing this, he sighed and shook his head. Both their strength and their techniques were just disappointing. With a gentle puff, he not only extinguished the fireball, but also sent the werewolf flying backward. The werewolf steadied himself, sweat trickling down his forehead. He couldn't believe it. He knew his partner's flames were powerful. How could a single breath blow them away like that? Then, to his horror, he realized he couldn't move. He was frozen in place by some kind of psychic force. His eyes went wide as he stared at Lu Sheng, stammering. How can you have such strong psychic power? Lu Sheng shook his head and replied, "This isn't just psychic power, it's divine power." The werewolf's body began to contort, bending at unnatural angles as though he were being twisted into a ball. He let out a painful scream. Watching this terrifying sight, his partner immediately turned and bolted. To her, maybe Lu Sheng was the real demon here. There was no way she could beat him. Her only option was to run for her life. But just as she took her first step, she heard a calm yet chilling voice beside her saying, "Don't panic, he's not a demon." She turned slowly, only to find the golden figure standing directly in front of her. He was about to treat her to something special. Meanwhile, on the speeding train, the girl paced anxiously, scanning every corner for Lu Sheng. Where had he gone, and why hadn't he come back yet? They were nearing their destination, and she wondered if their mission was really just over like that. Just then, she heard a familiar voice beside her. Turning, she was surprised and relieved to see Lu Sheng grinning at her. She asked, almost in disbelief, where he had gone. He replied casually, saying he had just finished a little sewing project while holding up a bundle of thick rope. She blinked, obviously not understanding. But Lu Sheng only smiled back, offering no further explanation. Elsewhere, those 2 top 10 demons were tightly bound to a steel pole right in the middle of the railway tracks. They tugged and strained, but their combined strength couldn't break free. With horror, they realized the ropes were crafted from rare mithril gold, making them unbreakable. Then, one of them looked up and froze in fear. 2 high-speed trains were approaching from opposite directions, each engine linked to the ropes binding them. Back on the train, Lu Sheng checked his watch and decided it was time. He raised one hand slightly, activating his psychic energy. The 2 demons felt the ropes tighten around them, pulling them in opposite directions. As the trains sped up, the tension grew until with one final pull, their bodies were torn apart by the force. Guess that's a modern take on the ancient pull-apart punishment. But this wasn't just about victory. It was about sending a message to anyone who dared to go after him. Just then, the officer approached him, reporting some unknown popping sounds. For his safety, she suggested calling in a helicopter to take him directly to the capital instead of staying on the train. Lu Sheng shook his head with a smile, instructing her instead to have someone clean up the tracks they had just passed. She nodded, uncertain about what was going on but determined to follow his orders. Meanwhile, back at the Dark Demon Society's temporary base, a man stared at a monitor. Horror struck. Another 2 of their top 10 demons' life signals had vanished, 3 in one day. He and his companion both trembled, whispering in disbelief. The top 10 demons were supposed to be godlike figures, each wielding incredible beast powers that made them feared worldwide. But now, 3 were dead in a single day. Could a martial saint have intervened? The woman beside him shook her head. She doubted that the 3 martial saints would have any special interest in their target. And the military didn't have anyone of that level, biting her lip. She finally concluded that they might have underestimated their target's power. He wasn't just at a top general's level. He was more likely on par with a marshal. The man could hardly believe what he was hearing. Was someone like this even possible? A top-tier great-grandmaster under 20, potentially with the power of a marshal. How were they supposed to handle this? Losing 3 top demons was too high a price. No payoff could justify such a setback. Should they just cut their losses and retreat? He was visibly shaken, but the woman beside him stayed remarkably calm. She agreed they needed to cut their losses, but retreat wasn't the answer. They had to finish the mission. After all, they'd been hunting this target relentlessly, and there was no way he wouldn't hold a grudge. If they let him keep growing, wouldn't he eventually come back for revenge? The man asked if they should immediately contact the organization for backup. But the woman shook her head. They still had the 4th-ranked demon, Lady Samajina. With her strength, she was confident they could kill the target. But the man pointed out a major issue. They had no direct contact with Lady Samajina. The organization hadn't provided that information. Suddenly, the woman dropped to her knees, clasping her hands in fervent prayer. She said they didn't need contact information. Samajina was always with them. The man watched, utterly confused. Then, without warning, she cried out, invoking the 4th demon, Lady Samajina, to descend. What happened next was horrifying. A hand emerged from the woman's mouth. The man scrambled back, completely shocked, but it only got worse. A woman began crawling out of the woman's mouth, stretching until the force burst the woman's head like a balloon. Now, standing naked before him, Samajina's cold gaze fell on the terrified man. She ordered him to provide the target's coordinates, showing no emotion and not even glancing at the sacrificed corpse behind her.